Today we expose 5 Australian snack brands that quietly turn your afternoon treat into a toxic mix of seed oils, chemical additives, and engineered textures. These bags sit in millions of Australian pantries, marketed as crunchy, moreish, and fun, but hiding heart-straining fats, mouth-destroying crunch, and ingredient lists that read more like a science experiment than real food. By the end, you will know 3 Australian options that are actually simple, safer as occasional treats, and far more worthy of your money. Australians have been told for decades that a bag of chips is the perfect addition to a lunchbox, party table, or movie night. But walk down the snack aisle at Coles or Woolworths today, and most mainstream chips and cheese snacks are fried in industrial seed oils such as canola and sunflower, boosted with flavor enhancers and so-called natural flavors, and processed to a hyper-crunchy, glass-like texture that many reviewers say actually hurts to eat. These highly refined oils oxidize easily at high frying temperatures, and when they dominate the diet, research links that pattern to more inflammation and poorer metabolic health markers, while the vague term natural flavors can hide dozens of separate compounds created in a lab, not a kitchen. So which brands are the worst offenders? Let us rip open the bags. Number 1. Cheeels. Cheeels are an Australian icon. Everyone remembers sliding them onto their fingers as a child, licking off the orange dust, and feeling that intense cheese hit. But many loyal fans say today's Cheeels taste nothing like the snack they grew up with. On product review, long-term buyers complain that the flavor has become weak and artificial, and that the texture has turned harsh and abrasive. One review says the new version does not taste like it used to, asks where the lovely cheesy flavor has gone, and calls the current taste fake. Others describe the rings as anemic-looking, overly smooth on the outside, very airy inside, and completely flavorless. The texture is another red flag. Multiple reviewers say Cheeels now feel like sandpaper and shred the roof of your mouth, especially if you eat more than a few. That sort of aggressive crunch does not come from a gentle bake. It comes from highly expanded corn or wheat starch that is extruded, then dried and fried to a uniform hardness. The ingredient list backs this up: cereal flours, vegetable oils, cheese powder, flavor enhancers, and colors, with canola or similar seed oils as the frying medium rather than butter or ghee. There is cheese powder present, but it is supported by artificial cheese flavor and other additives that stretch a relatively small amount of dairy across a very large batch. The marketing leans hard on nostalgia. Bright blue bag, bold Cheeels logo, talk of fun, sharing, and the Aussie legend everyone loves. The reality, according to a lot of recent customers, is a mouth-scratching ring with weak, fake-tasting cheese dust and a base that is mostly refined flour and cheap oil. If you are still buying these for your children because you remember loving them, you may actually be giving them a very different, much more processed product than the one you grew up with. Number 2. Doritos. Doritos used to be the king of flavored corn chips. Nacho cheese and Cool Ranch were the poster children for bold flavor. Recently, though, there has been a wave of complaints about recipe changes, especially around the new so-called bolder crunch texture. On review platforms, many people say the chips have become much harder, more painful to eat, and far less tasty. One reviewer says the new recipe is horrible and flavorless, and that Doritos used to be their favorite snack, but they no longer buy them since the change. Another complains that the new thicker chips stabbed their gum and felt like eating cardboard. The company's own marketing in overseas markets boasts about a bolder crunch and a new bite, which essentially means a denser, more rigid chip. To get that, manufacturers tweak the dough, frying time and moisture content so that the final chip is tougher and more resistant to breaking. Combined with intense seasonings, this pushes the sensory impact higher, but can also make the chips genuinely uncomfortable to eat in large handfuls, especially for children with softer mouths. Then there is the ingredient list. A typical bag of cheese-flavored corn chips lists corn, vegetable oil, and then a long seasoning blend containing milk solids, flavor enhancers such as monosodium glutamate, artificial colors, acidity regulators, sugar, and vague natural flavors. The vegetable oil is usually a seed oil such as canola or sunflower, chosen for cost and shelf stability rather than any particular health benefit. So when you reach for Doritos expecting the same satisfying hit you remember, you may instead get an aggressively hard chip with a harsh powder that no longer delivers on flavor and is built on the same cheap oil and additive base as the bargain brands. Number 3. Red Rock Deli. Red Rock Deli sells itself as the gourmet choice. The bags are matte black, the flavors are complex, and the price is higher than many standard chips. Varieties like Thai chili and lime, sweet chili and sour cream, and sea salt and balsamic vinegar sound like something from a modern restaurant menu rather than a petrol station shelf. However, Australian reviewers are increasingly critical of both taste and texture. On product review, several recent comments say, "The chips are far too hard, far too salty, and sometimes burn the mouth." One customer described a flavor as so salty that their stomach was burning afterwards, while another said the seasoning was so heavy with pepper that they could not taste anything else, and their mouth was left sore. There are also complaints that some of the special edition dips and corn-based snacks under the same brand name have strange, separated textures and flavor imbalances with bits of vegetable that do not blend well with the creamy base. All of this lines up with a product that is designed first and foremost to deliver a powerful burst of flavor and crunch, not to behave like real food that you would happily eat in a sensible portion. The base chips are fried in sunflower or similar seed oils, and the flavor systems rely heavily on natural flavor complexes, yeast extracts, and other enhancers to create the complex taste profiles promised on the bag. The brand language says premium and deli inspired. The lived experience for many customers is a mouthful of extremely hard, thick chips coated in a heavy, often burning seasoning that overwhelms the tongue and leaves you reaching for water. You are still getting an ultra-processed seed oil fried potato slice. You are just paying more for fancy flavor names. Number 4. Smith's Thinly Cut Potato Chips. Smith's is one of the oldest and most recognizable names in Australian chips. The thinly cut range is promoted as a lighter, crispier version of the classic ridged chip, with paper-thin slices that shatter easily and feel delicate on the tongue. The problem is that extremely thin slices have a far higher surface area to volume ratio, which means more of the chip is exposed to hot oil at every moment of frying. That is why these chips can taste extra oily, and why they often leave a persistent coating in your mouth. The ingredient lists for Smith's thinly cut flavors show potatoes, vegetable oil, and flavoring, with vegetable oil usually being a blend of canola, sunflower, or similar seed oils. These oils are high in polyunsaturated omega-6 fats and are heated to very high temperatures during industrial frying, which increases oxidation and produces compounds that, when eaten in large amounts and frequently over time, are associated in research with increased inflammation and cardiovascular risk. A chip eaten once in a while will not destroy your health, but a daily habit built around seed oil fried snacks is not a trivial choice. Customers also report that recent bags sometimes taste stale or slightly rancid straight after opening, which suggests that the oils can degrade in storage even before you bring them home. The texture of thinly cut is also not as gentle as the advertising implies. Yes, the chips shatter easily, but that shattering means more tiny, hard fragments that can lodge in gums and between teeth, and the very bottom of the bag often turns into an oily dust rather than intact chips. In other words, you are getting maximum processed fat and salt on a very fragile starch base, with minimal actual potato character left by the time you taste it. Number 5. Aldi Sprinters Original Crinkle Cut Potato Chips. Aldi Sprinters are the classic example of a home brand chip that wins almost entirely on price. A large bag for under $2 is a powerful draw for families watching their grocery budgets. However, the reviews paint a clear picture of what you are actually buying. Shoppers on review sites describe Sprinters as greasy, overly salty, and leaving a strange aftertaste that lingers long after you have finished the bag. Many also note that the chips are often soft or soggy rather than genuinely crisp, and that the quality seems inconsistent from batch to batch. Crinkle cutting is not just about aesthetics. The ridges increase surface area and create grooves that hold on to more oil and more salt. If the frying process is not carefully controlled, that can mean a chip that soaks up a lot of oil but does not fully crisp, so you get a heavy, greasy bite instead of a clean crunch. The ingredient list is short on paper, usually just potatoes, vegetable oil, and salt. But that unnamed vegetable oil is almost certainly the cheapest industrial seed oil available at the time of production, chosen to keep the price rock bottom. There is no incentive for a budget line like this to use higher quality oils or more careful temperature control when the selling point is simply the price per bag. When you combine the low cost with the very high palatability of fat and salt, it is easy to demolish half a bag without thinking, especially in front of a screen. But nutritionally, you are getting little more than starch and unstable oil, along with a blast of salt that can easily push a snack portion beyond a sensible share of your daily sodium intake. For children, that is an especially poor trade-off. From Cheeels to Doritos, from Rock Deli to Smith's and Aldi Sprinters, the same playbook shows up again and again. Industrial seed oils like canola and sunflower are the default frying mediums because they are cheap and store well, not because they are genuinely good for frequent high-heat cooking in the quantities used. Flavor systems lean heavily on salt, sugar, acids, yeast extracts, monosodium glutamate, and umbrella terms such as natural flavors to create an addictive flavor burst that masks the relatively bland taste of the underlying starch and oil. Textures are deliberately engineered to be harder, crunchier, and more stimulating, even at the cost of comfort, because food science shows that loud, intense crunch enhances the sense of satisfaction and encourages continued eating. The entire system is designed around maximizing how much you eat and how often you come back for more, not around supporting your health. The oils are chosen for profit margins and logistics. The flavors are tuned to hit reward centers in your brain. The bags are sized and priced to make sharing of fiction and solo binging easy. When you hear "enjoy in moderation" in the advertisements, it is worth remembering that nothing about the underlying design is moderate, but you do not have to accept that as your only option. Now let us talk about Australian options that are actually worth your time as occasional treats. Number 1. Simple kettle-cooked sea salt chips. Some kettle-cooked sea salt chips sold in Australian supermarkets offer a slightly better profile than the mainstream flavored options, as long as you choose carefully. For example, plain sea salt kettle chips often have just 3 ingredients on the label: potatoes, sunflower or similar oil, and sea salt. The absence of flavor enhancers, sugar, and complex seasoning blends means you are at least avoiding some of the more engineered aspects of typical snacks. Because kettle cooking uses batch frying rather than continuous conveyor frying, it can result in a chip with a more robust, less fragile texture and a more distinct potato flavor, which many reviewers praise as tasting more real and less greasy than the cheapest thin chips. Sunflower oil is still a seed oil, and this is still a deep-fried snack, so this is not a health food. However, as an occasional treat, a short ingredient list and a focus on potato and salt rather than chemical flavor systems moves you a meaningful step away from the worst offenders. Number 2. Small batch and artisan chips. In many Australian cities, you can now find smaller brands of chips at independent grocers, farmers markets, and online stores that take a more old-fashioned approach. These artisan-style makers often use local potatoes, cook in smaller batches, and may choose more stable fats, such as rice bran oil, high oleic sunflower oil, or in some niche cases even animal fats like beef dripping or lard. Their labels tend to list just potatoes, the chosen cooking fat, salt, and perhaps 1 or 2 herbs or spices. These products are more expensive per bag, but there is a clear trade-off. You get a cleaner ingredient list, more obvious potato taste, and textures that are crunchy without being glass-hard. Because they are not trying to compete purely on price with the supermarket giants, they have more room to prioritize quality. They are still snacks that you should eat occasionally, but they respect your body and your palate more than the ultra-processed standard. Number 3. The do-it-yourself baked potato wedge. The simplest and most powerful option is to take back control entirely. A bag of Australian potatoes, some olive oil, salt, and herbs can give you a snack that costs far less per serve than even the cheapest chips, and that leaves you feeling satisfied rather than sluggish. Cut the potatoes into wedges or thick slices. Toss with a modest amount of extra virgin olive oil, sea salt, and perhaps rosemary or paprika. Spread them out on a baking tray and roast in a hot oven until golden and crisp at the edges. Because you are using whole potatoes, you keep the natural fiber and potassium that are largely absent from commercial chips once they are ultra-processed and dusted. Because you are baking rather than deep frying, you use much less oil overall. Because you are using olive oil rather than seed oils, you get a fat profile that is more stable under heat and associated with better cardiovascular outcomes when used in normal cooking quantities. And because you made them yourself, there is no hidden natural flavor, no color additive, and no question about what you just ate. A $2 bag of Aldi chips or supermarket home brand crisps looks like a bargain at the checkout, but that price hides a lot. You are getting starch stripped of most of its original nutrients, soaked in very hot industrial seed oils that may already have begun to oxidize, and blasted with salt and additives. A $5 or $6 bag of artisan chips gives you a cleaner, less manipulated product. A $3 bag of potatoes gives you several trays of home-baked wedges, each with a far better balance of real food and fat. When you think in terms of long-term health costs, especially if chips are a weekly or daily habit, the bargain starts to look like a very expensive way to get brief pleasure and long-term inflammation. Australian food culture has drifted from simple homemade snacks to industrially engineered products that slice, fry, flavor, and texturize every last bit of comfort and satiety out of the potato and replace it with something that plays your brain like a slot machine. You do not have to keep rewarding that system. Your health matters. Your children's lunchboxes matter. The snacks you choose send a message about what kind of food you want in your supermarket. Next time you are in Coles, Woolworths, or Aldi, do an experiment. Walk past the Cheeels and Doritos, the deli-style bags and the budget crinkle cuts. Turn a few of them over and read the full ingredient lists and oil types. Then head to the aisle with plain kettle-cooked sea salt chips and compare. Or skip the chip aisle altogether and grab a bag of potatoes and some good olive oil. The difference in taste Texture and how you feel afterwards will surprise you. And once you make that shift a few times, it becomes very hard to go back to orange-dusted rings and cardboard crunch. If this video made you check your pantry, hit that like button, subscribe for more supermarket breakdowns, and turn on notifications so that you do not miss the next investigation. And in the comments, tell me which snack shocked you the most. Was it the mouth-shredding cheese rings, the cardboard-like corn chips, the burning deli-style crisps, or the greasy budget crinkle cuts? Let us start a conversation that the supermarkets cannot ignore.